And it is like a monument out there, Frank, as you well know, because you've been right here next to it. You know, the landing gear came out a little bit earlier this time, but that, again, is just an energy management consideration. It depends on their airspeed and altitude.
Well, it was a flawless descent and certainly a flawless landing. You're right, Gene. The nose does stay down this time, didn't it? All right, as we look at the viewing stand there with the president and the various trucks going out now to secure the Columbia, who's come down, we'll pause for just a moment. Our coverage of Space Shuttle Columbia will continue in a moment.
After an extremely successful mission, sitting on the runway, the paved runway here at Edwards, the shuttle now being vented, ready for the astronauts to get out and be greeted by the president. He will later talk here, and for a preview, here's Bill Plant.
Terry, the president will say this morning that the
chase plane right alongside, coming in a flawless landing, the mountains in the distance. She was still at some height here, and still in that very, very steep drop, coming down to only 2,500 feet before the pilot, Ken Mattingly, took over. There's the flare out and bringing her on down. So, Columbia has landed. You're watching a videotape of the landing that took place just a moment ago. The president will go out to greet the astronauts as they step down from their space plane. That'll be in about half an hour. And we'll be back on the air to bring you that event. Later, we'll also broadcast the president's speech at the Edwards Air Force Base. We're going to resume our regular programming now. For most of the stations with us in the East and Midwest, that means we'll pick up with the remainder of the David Brinkley broadcast 1 minute from now. More space coverage later. For now, this is Frank Reynolds in Washington.
Their mission, the landing, very close to perfection. NASA calls it outstanding. A full report on the CBS Evening News tonight. And now for Leo Krupp of Rockwell International, I'm Terry Drinkwater, wishing you the best of the rest of this 4th of July.
Gears down and locked.
This has been a CBS News special report. The landing of Space Shuttle 4.
Really was the smoke from the tires in the past, while we've seen smoke from the desert. And here is Gene Cernan and Lynn Sherr, who have been out there watching this magnificent sight this morning. Well, what do you have to say for yourselves now? You've executed another perfect landing. Congratulations to you both.
Frank, after White Sands and Edwards here today, Lynn and I just declared ourselves operational in the wind.
You know, even though it was quite calm and they couldn't get their crosswind landing they wanted, Frank, it is a little windy up here in the platform, but that's very deceptive. They simply didn't have the crosswind that they wanted, the steady crosswinds for that landing, and that is still a test objective, even though it is going to be operational after this flight, and they will now start concentrating on what they're carrying into space, on what they're doing up there, as opposed to just these spectacular launches and landings that we've been awed by. Mattingly himself said could very well become routine business.
Oh, it's hard to believe, Lynn, that it's ever really going to become routine, because it's really just such a pretty sight. See it coming down, and you realize that it's been up there in space, whizzing all around the globe in orbit, sending back usually those fantastic pictures. Well, this is a rather special day, of course, because it is not only the 4th of July, but this is the first time that the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, is out there to greet the astronauts personally as they step down from their spacecraft. And the President will do that very shortly, so we'll be on the air to bring you that, and our coverage of Space Shuttle Columbia will continue in a moment. And here is Columbia, the Space Shuttle, back from space now, 7 days, 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 40 seconds after lifting off last Sunday from the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral. Landed less than 50 minutes or so ago, right there at the perfect spot, perfect landing at Edwards Air Force Base. The astronauts themselves are still inside the spacecraft. They've not yet been cleared to get out, but as you see, the ramp there is up at the hatch. I believe that hatch is open, but the astronauts have not yet emerged, and they won't until another visitor arrives at the base of the ramp, President Reagan. And Mrs. Reagan will go out to personally greet the astronauts as they step on Earth after that voyage of some 2.8 million miles around the Earth. The President has been spending the time between the landing of the Columbia and the time that he goes out to greet the astronauts inside one of the buildings here at the Dryden Research Center. at Edwards Air Force Base, presenting the Space Medal to the astronauts of the last flight, Jack Lausma and Gordon Fullerton. And the president will shortly come out and go out to greet the astronauts as they come down the steps and step on terra firma once again. Well, it has been a flawless mission. I suppose there have been a little few bugs here and there, but anytime you attempt an enterprise so vast and so far-reaching as this, why, there are bound to be a few things that don't turn out quite as perfectly as planned. But Jules Bregmen has this report on just what was accomplished in this mission of Columbia.
4, 3, 2, 1, and we have solid motor ignition and liftoff.
The fourth and final test flight of Columbia blazed into orbit right on time, a space shuttle first. Astronauts T.K. Mattingly and Henry Hartsfield put Columbia through her paces in what NASA officials called one of the smoothest flights ever. They test-fired the reaction control system motors, proving their reliability for future missions. Mattingly tried on the EVA spacesuit needed for work in the payload bay. Hartsfield used the treadmill to keep the astronauts' hearts and legs in shape for their return to Earth. They showed us how well they did with space food. Mattingly even had time to toss peanuts at the TV camera. And he tested suction cup shoes to anchor them in the weightlessness of space. They operated the electrophoresis experiment using space to manufacture better drugs more cheaply. The only major problem developed on day 4 when Columbia's payload bay doors warped and could not be closed. Shifting the spaceship's attitude overnight was enough to balance out the deep cold of space that had caused the problem.
Stand by, mark, close. Okay, they close normally.
Problems solved and experiments completed, the astronauts will remember seeing the Earth below, the state of Florida, and their launch site, Cape Canaveral, as they flew over at 5 miles a second. Not Star Trek's Warp 3, but fast enough. And after that perfect flight and perfect landing, Frank, the shuttle will be declared operational later today or tomorrow by NASA itself, ready to start earning money, paying its own way on its very next flight, the 5th mission, in November. Frank?
Well, the next flight will be unique, of course, not only because it will be the first fully operational flight of the shuttle, but also because it's going to have some extra people on board. Heretofore, that's been a crew of 2. On the next flight in November, there will be 4 people on board. Let's show them to you right now. Here's Vance Brand and William Lenoir, who is, as I understand it, Jules, one of the mission specialists. The co-pilot will be Robert Overmeyer, and Joe Allen will also be one of the mission specialists. So there'll be twice as many people on board. Jules, what do they expect to accomplish in this first operational mission? Actually, they're going to launch a couple of satellites, aren't they?
They have 2 commercial satellites to launch. The first business satellite, called the STS-4 and actually they open the payload bay doors and spring-fed motors automatically start up and then kick them up to a 22,000-mile synchronous orbit. The next day they will launch the first Canadian satellite, a ComSat, Telesat-E.
And won't that be a spacewalk too?
That's still being decided, Frank. It now looks like there will be a spacewalk, but it's still not finally decided.
Okay, Jules, thank you very much. Well, that's, of course, all going to happen in November. We still have some ceremonies to celebrate today. Here, once again, is the scene at Edwards Air Force Base in California, out there in the Mojave Desert, as Columbia is still being examined by the various members of the ground crew who have to make sure that it's safe for the astronauts to get off and for the president to go out there and greet them. Lynn, pretty big crowd.
Yes, it is, Frank, and they got to see Commander Mattingly, who was described to us as a very regimented man, land that space plane right smack in the middle of the runway. Gene, what do you think? How'd it look to you?
Do I have to say he was trained by the Navy again? I might just say, Frank, real quick, operationally really means to us that we've got confidence in the shuttle. They're not going to wear their spacesuits. They're taking 4 men. They know what the systems will do. They know how the spacecraft reacts thermally, and now they're going to start utilizing it the way it was designed to be used.
Well, that, of course, is the whole point of the operation, of the exercise. These 4 test flights preceded by, gee, how many, 3 or 4 simulated landings when they dropped from the 747. Actually, that's another thing that we're going to see later today. Challenger, the next orbiter, will be taking off from Edwards Air Force Base today on board piggyback on board a 747 for the flight to the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral. Well, we're going to go off the air for a little while now, but we'll be back in about 30 or 40 minutes, and we'll show you then the President greeting the astronauts, and also Mr. Reagan will have a speech to make about the future commitment of the United States to space exploration, and I'm sure you're going to find that very interesting. So that's it for right now. This is Frank Reynolds in Washington. We'll be back in about 30 or 40 minutes.